this guy off because he's loud. So I bought this class sparked me to buy a new dehydrator, as this one is borrowed from the guy who manages my store next door, because he doesn't really use it anymore. And we're always dehydrating herbs. So I was like, I'm going to buy a new one. And I bought it, and it was supposed to come in yesterday. And it came in, and it was in a nice little package. And it was a set of, basically essentially like a call center set of headphones that you hook up to like a plug-in phone. You know, and I used to work at a call center, so I thought it was just really funny. And so my dehydrator, somebody got a dehydrator, and I got a set of headphones. So now it won't come till Monday. I was super stoked because I was going to dehydrate all this stuff over the weekend. So
I have no one in this process.
yeah, live and learn, but shouldn't wait till the last minute. So everybody got garden stuff growing already this year?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I got tomatoes already.
Me too.
Yeah, we planted yesterday. We're late.
I went from none to a lot, and I'm going to have way too many. So I decided to take 8 different soils that we have next door, from the cheapest to the most expensive, and do a trial for growing tomatoes. And I did this last year with just 2. My wife is not very happy about it right now because now I've got 8 pots lying in the driveway because there's nowhere else to go with them. And she's gonna complain when all the tomatoes start setting, and she's got to do something with them because I don't have time. But
Rabbit fertilizer on one side.
we're up to I think we're getting close to up to all those 8 plants. I think we're getting close to 40 or 50 tomatoes set so far. So
Oh my God.
yeah, so and
We did 5.
I do lazy people version. I don't skin. I don't do anything. I just literally cut them. Or we quarter them, lay them open face, salt, pepper, garlic them, oven roast them, and then they just get pureed, like skin and all. And I just turn them into a base for making sauce because I hate slicing tomatoes.
I used to put them whole in the freezer.
Yeah.
And then when they freeze, you run a little warm water on them, and that skin just peels right.
There's I was listening to a podcast yesterday about preserving, and they were talking about how they freeze dry their tomatoes, and said it's very you can only do certain stuff with them when you rehydrate them, but it's very interesting because dehydrated stuff, the texture is just I can't get behind it. I don't know.
I don't think I'd make a spaghetti with freeze dried.
But I mean, it might for stuff for making sauces and stuff. They say it works good because it all cooks down and blends in.
And it rehydrates.
Yeah, but he said everything that you dehydrate, you have to reconstitute with different temperature waters and stuff because otherwise they've kind of dialed it in. So they apparently wrote a book, so I'm interested to see what that's like. So I guess we're gonna get going. I'll give you guys when they bring the handouts. I'll make sure everybody has one. So I apologize for being ill prepared today, but we shall get going. So a lot of ground to cover. As always, you're welcome to interrupt and ask any questions that you want. And at the end, if you have non-related topic questions, feel free to ask away. I'm here until whenever. So, so essentially, our topic today is growing herbs, and then talking about some ways to utilize them once we've actually grown them. But first, I think it's important to understand a little bit about why we might want to grow them, what's required to grow them, and maybe how much do we need of some of these items. Because sometimes, when we're thinking about growing a garden, we often, we might plant a bunch of tomatoes, a bunch of peppers, but when it comes to herbs, we might overplant. And I tend to see people overplant, and some people don't plant enough. It really depends on what you like and what you want to use. So when we're looking at why we might grow them, I genuinely believe that herbs are one of the very, very few things that you can grow in the garden that you actually come out ahead on the pocketbook side of things. A lot of the herbs that you can grow here, specifically in our climate, are perennials. So they're going to be here year after year. So you can buy one, at least for us, an herb is $3 at my shop. One $3 plant turns into, boatloads of rosemary, and I get probably 20 times this a year if I really wanted that much of it. So some of these items will stick around year after year after year. And so it's one of the few things, unlike tomatoes or other very high care, high input items, that we don't have to put a lot into, and we're going to get not only like personal benefit from it, from actually like harvesting, maybe utilizing, but we're also going to get some ecological benefits that I think honestly outweigh our personal use benefits. Secondly, fresh stuff is better, right?
Yes.
You know, or you know, whether it really is, and like, you know, mentally, you know, our mind will believe that it tastes better, it's fresher, but scientifically, the law of nature says if we're following good soil practices and we are following natural methods, that our produce is actually going to taste better, because you're going to have different compounds, different, I think it's flavonoids is the right term. You got those different compounds that are in there that are going to actually be elevated, and they will genuinely taste better than what you get in the store. And then because you're taking it, if you're cutting it fresh and you're using it fresh, then you're going to get the highest medicinal or nutritional benefit from anything that you take out of the garden. Because the longer these herbs sit up here, they're going to deteriorate, because essentially I've got them in water and they'll be all right for a while, but they're being subjected to stress. And whenever stress is subjected to anything, it depletes resources. So it's just like us. If we stick outside in the hot summer with no water, no food, we get dehydrated. Eventually we wither away, and you know, we could die. Come on in. So ideally, that's one way to add high value, very, very flavorful things that we can harvest and use in the garden, but at the same time, freshness and robust herbs are going to bring long-term sustainability to our garden, because it's going to help us create a diverse environment. But two, how many of you buy herbs from the grocery store on a regular basis? Do a lot of the herbs that you get, like, how do they package a couple sprigs of rosemary in the grocery store?
They like
In a,
spit them around
and sometimes they come in these little plastic containers that makes, you know, trying to keep that humidity and moisture there. So packaging, you're buying very little stuff and it's very wasteful. The packaging probably costs more than the actual herbs in which that you purchased. So from a sustainability standpoint, most of these items up on the table, we can grow these at home and have them over and over again with little to no ecological impact, whether it comes from our inputs into the garden, but also we don't need packaging. All we need to be able to do is have some way to utilize them and process them. The part of herbs that we're not going to talk about, because number one, I am not an expert in health and science, and I'm only going to teach you things that I'm confident that I know enough about to stand up here. But herbs bring medicinal benefits. They help with gut health. They help with anti-inflammatory properties. So there's lots of things that we can get that can help us be healthier. It's said, you know, if you have this, you have like a microbiome in your gut, and the gut impacts like your mental ability to process things, to remember things. It also helps us process nutrients. So herbs were once, ideally, before we ever came along, some of the only medicine there was. You know, there wasn't pharmaceutical medicine. So there's a lot of things out here that a lot of people still really highly believe in and a lot of people use. And I encourage you to explore those things on your own. But medicinal benefits are kind of a gray area from a teaching standpoint for me. So.
Do you have the turmeric roots in the store?
I don't know. Sometimes we can get turmeric roots. Turmeric does really, really well here, but they're harder to get. A lot of times we can only get them in an established plant from a fruit grower, or like maybe they grow fruit trees or citrus trees. Those are going to be the people that tend to grow those items over just a standard nursery. But you can even grow them from what you get in the store sometimes. If you get like an organic turmeric root, you could definitely start it because it's just like ginger. You know, all you need is a piece of ginger and you could root it and grow it. And
I've
see,
tried that a couple of times, and it gets started, but it doesn't finish. I don't know
there,
what we do wrong.
it's a rhizome, so the conditions are a little different, so it can be a little more difficult. So number 5 on my list of why we should grow our own herbs, it to me is honestly, from a personal standpoint, it's the most important. Herbs are going to help you create a diverse garden. And if any, I know some of you people are familiar faces in here. The one thing that I talk about more than anything is plant diversity, because we can easily grow the things that we want, and we don't want to waste a lot of time and energy getting things that we don't want. Chris, when you go back, can you tell her to print me more?
Yes.
So if anybody can share temporarily, just so that we can, I'll get some more. So no problem. Oh, you got one? Yes, sir. Do you want one as well? I got one more. So, all right. So not only can we get harvestable, usable items that most all of us, if we cook at home, probably use a lot of these items already, but we can also bring in a wide array of pollinators. We can bring in a wide array of beneficial predators. So we're diversifying not only our plants, but we're diversifying our insect population. And that's going to help us. You know, you bring in some of these items that flower, that consistently flower over a whole season that we can still use. They're going to help us prevent common issues like maybe how many people in here grow squash? How many people have squash pollination problems? It's pretty common. You know, you get the tiny squash, it starts getting black and it falls off. It's because it didn't get pollinated. It's pollination. You know, yeah, we can go out there and we can hand pollinate and we can take care of that, you know, but we could mitigate some of those potential issues by having a diverser environment and bringing in a wider array of pollinators and a more abundance of them so that maybe they're going to do that job for us. And it doesn't mean we still can't have those same problems, but ideally, we want to do everything we can to make this happen naturally, to not have to intervene. So, herbs are one of those items that I sometimes think get. People look at them and they're kind of scared by them. They think that they're difficult, but truthfully, I think that herbs, like any beginner gardener that I get, this is if they're intimidated by tomatoes or fruiting vegetables, this is the first thing that I recommend planting, because genuinely, from a growing standpoint, they are the easiest. There are a few out there that are a little more persnickety than others, but overall, most of these items are pretty carefree. How many of you have ever killed rosemary? All right, we got a problem then. Do you know why you killed it?
I forgot to water it because I went out of town.
You most likely, you could actually, for like this rosemary here hasn't been watered, but probably once in 6 months. Rosemary is actually you treat it like
my rosemary bad.
but you might have overwatered it prior to,
Maybe I did. Yeah.
and it just became stressed. So, you know, most of your herbs are going to need very similar care. Rosemary is one of the few that you can treat this like a succulent. Plant it out there, let it go. You can grow certain varieties of rosemary can turn into a giant shrub, and they survive they survive crazy amounts of time because they have very native type qualities to some of the plants we natively can grow here on an ornamental side, because they don't really require a lot of water. So if you are killing this, you're over caring 99% of the time. But you know, that doesn't mean that you need to forget about everything. But I ask that because it's one that I find the absolute easiest. This rosemary plant was planted almost 5 years ago, and it's still alive today. And I could hold it like this. It's a trelling or a carpeting type, so it grows mostly on the ground, out of the edge of a raised bed. But it's very, very prolific, and I rarely water it. And I make sure that I put other things near it that are not heavy water needs. So you don't want to put a tomato plant right next to a rosemary because you're going to water the crap out of that tomato plant, and that rosemary is not going to like it.
If you water it every day, can it die?
Yes. You can, if it, every plant likes its own conditions. So if you get too much water, then your roots underground will begin to rot, or you'll begin to wash all the nutrients away from inside the root ball, and then it begins to turn yellow or struggle. It might start browning. A lot of times you see the tips begin to brown. And you can see the same thing happen on certain times when you don't water. So it's kind of you got to look and you have to learn your soil. So some herbs that we can grow that are overall pretty easy. Rosemary, I genuinely believe, top 2 easiest ones. Put it in an area, plant it higher, set it and forget it. Straight up the easiest herb on the planet, in my opinion, is basil. How many of you like basil?
Oh,
Everybody loves basil. There's all kinds of different basils. The general population likes Italian basil because that's what we're familiar with. We're familiar with the basil that we cook with, and that brings, that particular flavor profile. And that's what's in most people's minds. So Italian basil, it's great, but Italian basil is a lot of work because this is not Italian basil. So here we have Thai basil, and then we have cinnamon basil. So these, you see, if I let my Genovese or my Italian basil flower like this, the flavor profile is going to change, and it's going to not be, it gets like a bitter, a different taste to it. So Genovese basil, you constantly need to be cutting on it. You need to keep it from flowering, so you're cutting it back. Even if you're not going to use it, cut it. Keep it compact, keep it from flowering. It's kind of always in recovery mode. Whereas we have other types like this that are going to flower, and then the flavor profile that they provide are going to be very, very similar. A very difficult variety to come by, but that has a very similar taste profile to Italian basil, but it can flower all summer long and not change, is African blue basil. It's not something you can easily buy around here. You can every once in a while find it at the mom and pop shops. But can you imagine if you had a plant this big around, that's one basil, that's covered up in those flowers? What are you going to see in abundance of? Bees, bumblebees, honeybees, butterflies. Go out at nighttime with a flashlight, it'll be covered in moths. So there's a whole other world of pollinators that we as daygoers don't really see. And so having high flowering items like this are going to help increase pollination and give you something that you can use.
Yeah, my sweet basil lasted even into the winter time.
Yeah.
And it was really, really, I mean, it was just so prolific and everything that I wound up having it everywhere, and I didn't even plant it there. And this year, the replanting of the seeds is happening automatically.
Yep.
So I'm having to kind of
Call them out or dig them up and give them away. So we had 2 basil plants last year. By the end of the season, we had about 6 basil plants. There's one that grew in the rocks right on the edge outside the raised bed on the ground. All these died in the frost or the freeze. Every last one of them is back, including the one in the rocks. And we have like probably about 20 more volunteers. Now I can't let all those grow because these varieties get really, really big, and I don't want to eat up all my space, so we're going to dig up some of those and pot them up and give them away. But overall, even if they die back, flowering, letting your basil flower, you'll get it to come back next year. It's super easy. It doesn't like cold, but overall, it's an easy plant.
I've got something eating mine though.
Really?
Yes.
yeah, I do too.
I have a second generation
too.
that came up, and it's being eat up. Even my little seedlings that I put out.
Oh, that's interesting.
No, and I got them underneath my tomato plants.
Another one that's very popular amongst, most home gardeners. How many of you like to grow mint?
Oh,
So mint,
It's over.
mint's wonderful. Mint is a dual-edged sword. You can't, intermingling mint in your beds is It can go one of two ways. It can go real easy, or it can overtake everything. So a simple tip that we do at home: we pot all of our mints in medium-sized pots, and we stage them around the garden. We move them. That way, we keep them from overtaking. Because I planted a 4-foot diameter raised bed with like 2 or 3 different species of mint. I could pull up a root, like runners of roots around the outer edge, probably as big as a softball, just full of roots. I mean, it just circling, overtaking. And there was so much roots that the mint actually started to deteriorate because it couldn't get enough nutrients. It was pushing all the soil out and away and sucking up all the water. So mint's a great one. Mint is actually going to attract pollinators, and it's actually very good for disrupting the senses of other insects. So, one of the things that we get in herbs is aromatics. They bring aromatics to food. They bring aromatics to the garden. You can take lemongrass, for instance. Lemongrass is.
What do you do with lemongrass? I have got some.
You can use it in tea. Everybody loves it for mosquitoes, but you have to release the oils. So all these things have aromatics, and when they're out in the garden, pests can sense these things, and pests have like receptors. They find plants by like airwaves, by aromas, all kinds of different things that plants put out, compounds. So when you have herbs in the garden, then you can disrupt a plant or an insect's ability to find what they're looking for. It doesn't always work, but oftentimes, creating this diversity helps you keep a more nuisance pest-free environment.
I just wanted to go back to the mint for a second. We're here for her. We went to a restaurant, she got a drink, and they had a mint stem in it. And she took it home, and that mint is at least this big now. She planted it, potted it, and everything.
Thanks, Steve.
She's very
I'm not.
proud of her mint.
Yeah, it's a
Frozen drink from a restaurant.
yeah.
That's really cool. I like to model it in lemonade.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
We'll talk about some of the uses towards the end, because there's a lot of stuff you can do with this.
Lemongrass to make a lemongrass paste. It's really good in marinade. Yeah, with just the soft bits. You have to put all the hard stuff on.
If you like mint, lemon balm is another one. Really good perennial. Like mine out in the back garden died. It's back. It still looks a little pitiful right now because I haven't really been caring for it. This one came from my friend Desiree's garden around the corner. But lemon balm and mint make really good tea together. But all these have those aromatics. Every last one of these has some scent or use to it, whether it's for us personally or for in the garden for attracting beneficial pollinators, disrupting unwanted pests. Some of these herbs are going to grow really, really fast. Some are going to grow slower. Oregano, rosemary tend to establish a little bit slower because they're more of a woody, herbaceous type plant. Basil is going to grow really quick. All the ones that jump back from seed that were this big are now this big. They're growing rapidly, and they will get massive. So one of the things that you have to consider is how much of this do I actually need? Parsley. How many parsley plants do you think you need to get what you need for your own personal use at home?
Probably one.
One. The last time I didn't plant any last year. The year before I planted it, and I probably, because I'm not a big guy, I probably could have hidden behind it and ducked down, and nobody could have seen me. It was so big, genuinely, I couldn't process it all. And even if I would have processed a third of it, it would have grown back, and I would have got more and more and more. But I got everything I needed off one harvest for drying and using. So a lot of these items, don't overplant them. A lot of these things you can do one plant and you're going to have plenty. What's your question, Val?
Is there any way you can make it to where it stops growing, but it grows the other way?
So you can. One of the ways that you could keep these from getting big is you can continue to cut on them. So every time you cut a plant, it's going to grow 2 new branches, and so you're going to make it be smaller and more compact. So you can limit the size of these plants so they don't get overly big. I let mine go wild. This tarragon I had, I cut maybe 1/10 of this plant out, I mean, it's everywhere. It's just it's laying on the ground. It's growing upright. It's all over the place. So it just depends on how you want to do it, but you can keep them smaller and more compact. And depending on what you like to grow and how much stuff you like to do, you may need to keep it that way so you're not wasting all your space.
How about cilantro? Doesn't it die back? It doesn't die back?
Cilantro really is even though it's in the parsley family, it's a cool season herb. When you go and you buy cilantro, it's always labeled as slow bolting. So when your green type stuff gets too warm, it goes to seed. And when it goes to seed, you get compounds that make the foliage bitter and gives it a taste that people don't like. And that's because that bitterness is helping protect that plant from being eaten, because it's protecting its reproductive phase in its life. So that's why when your winter garden, it goes to seed, or your broccoli goes, broccoli if it goes to seed is fine, but like your cabbages, if you grow like bok choy or something like that and it starts putting on a seed head, the flavor profile changes drastically because it's in protection mode. It's trying to finish flowering, drop the seeds, and reproduce. So the same thing happens with cilantro. So cilantro is best grown early spring or in the fall and overwintered if you can, because you'll get more tasteful, abundant amounts of it.
Because you can harvest what you need, leave some to seed.
Yep, and two, if you grow it over the winter and you let it go to seed, cilantro is a good one, because cilantro, once it goes to seed, you can harvest those seeds, and then now you have coriander, so you have something that has a totally different profile that you can use in the kitchen. Yeah, so if you go buy seeds from me, theoretically on the jar it says cilantro, but we buy coriander seeds. So most of these items are, a lot of these items are going to be annuals in all aspects, but because of our warm climate and depending on how your garden is set up, you may be able to overwinter a lot of these items, and you may not have to redo them over and over again. And those that do die back, like we talked about basil, it's got to pop back on its own. If not, herbs are fairly cheap, but most of this stuff, even if it dies back to the root, will come back. But things like rosemary, oregano, we like pineapple sage a lot. Good complementary plant for strawberries, great for hummingbirds and bees. It'll die back because it's really woody, and it will come back every year. So you have a lot of items that are perennials here. So don't feel like you have to remove them. Find you a spot and plan out your space so that you can plant some of these and they can become staples. Almost every one of our raised beds has some form of an herb in it that is a permanent fixture every single season. So you can see, this is just some pictures from my garden at home in different stages. If you look, there's not like one set pattern here. We don't have all of our tomatoes in one bed. We don't have all of our herbs in one bed. What we're doing is we're trying to mimic nature, essentially. We want to have things spaced out around. We don't ever want to be putting all our eggs in one basket. We want to try to eliminate pests from attacking all of one crop in one bed. So that's how we utilize these herbs, and we space them out, and then we plant around them as staples inside the garden. And a lot of these, they can be done in containers. If you don't want to give up real estate to herbs, containerize them, keep them going, move them around as you need. Some of these are really good companions for other items. Old basil and tomato. The pineapple sage I like a lot with my strawberries are flourishing this year more than ever. And I don't know for sure if that's the reason why, but they are known companions and they're both thriving. Let's see. Maybe I'll go back. I don't remember what this one is. Play. I don't remember. So there's, at the beginning, there's my one parsley, and it got bigger than that. So massive, does anybody really need that much parsley?
No.
I don't know. Maybe y'all love parsley more than I do, but that's a lot. I use it a lot, but a little bit goes a long way. It's one of the slowest used up herbs I have in the kitchen. So we can also, in wintertime, if we have some really large staples, we can grow a lot of these inside. There are a few core principles we need to make sure we understand in order to grow any of these inside. Number one, we got to have consistent light. So it can't be like the light here in this window. This light here is bright enough to light up this room because the ceiling light in here, I don't even know why we put it in here. It doesn't do anything. It's not bright. So the natural light here is bright, but this window is not bright enough here, or even in that room there is worse. The light is not enough to grow anything. And once the sun gets over that front side, it will have enough light, but it's going to be too hot. So you have to be mindful, not every kitchen or interior space may have the setup to grow something successfully without supplemental light from a grow light. So keep that in mind. If you want to grow some things in the off season, whenever they're not going to be producing or growing in the cold time, you could grow them inside, but you might need supplemental light. Usually a south-facing window, southeast-facing window does really, really well. You'll get morning to midday light. It's bright. It's not hot. But you'll know if you're not getting enough light because like anything else, it's going to get leggy, it's going to stretch, and it's going to stress. Outside, most all these items are going to need very, very similar care. They need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, regardless whether they're inside or outside, and they need darkness. If you put them inside, you want to make sure they have darkness. Plants, just like us, need rest. I know this lady here was at the talk for Microlife at the Master Gardeners the other night, but cool fact, like I didn't realize, and I always correlate what plants need to what humans need. That we share, I think, over 60% similar DNA or same DNA as plants. So it makes a lot of sense to me now as to why I always think about what plants don't like are very similar to what we don't like, stressors and things. So we want natural light, we want bright light, but they're still not going to love blistering afternoon hot sun. So if you want to keep them healthy, keep them from bolting and going to seed, and you're getting full sun, think about ways to provide shade, whether with a shade cloth, they can extend your harvest and usable production. Every one of these items up here is going to like well-draining soil, especially rosemary. You can almost grow this in a cactus succulent type soil, something that's not going to hold a lot of moisture. I have success with any type of soil with it, but I have to understand that I don't want to water it. I want to leave it alone and let it be. But we want to make sure that we've got good draining soil, good amounts of organic matter, so that our soil stays viable and full of nutrition. If we're going to do them in containers, make sure we have plenty of drain holes, and make sure we don't necessarily have to use like potting soil if we're putting it in containers. But we need to make sure that our soil has ingredients that will drain and that we have a nice fine texture, and that excess moisture is going to move out. But we also have something that's going to hold some moisture in there, because pots are going to dry out faster, nutrients are going to go away faster. So if you're going to grow exclusively in containers, make sure you're supplementing with your food or fertilizer more often to keep the plant less stressed, healthier, thicker, with a more robust growth. Watering, most all your spring vegetables, herbs, they're going to want about 1 inch of water per week, which seems like it's not really that much when you really think about it. And depending on your conditions, every one of us is going to water differently. If your garden is in full afternoon sun, you might water every day the hotter it gets. Mine's in a filtered light, so I water every couple days, oftentimes even in summer. There are a few items I might have to water more consistently, but learn your soil, put your hands in the dirt. There is no magic formula for how often to water. It's all about understanding how your soil holds moisture. Stick your fingers in the dirt. If the top couple inches are dry, then you most likely need to water. But if you stick your hand down, even past those top couple inches, and it's damp and tacky, and you come out with wet soil on your hands, but it's not saturated, and your plant still looks healthy, you can leave it alone. The more you water, the more you're washing out nutrients, and the more you're compacting the soil if you overwater. So be careful not to overwater. It's probably the most complicated thing, or that's probably the thing that people most overcomplicate because they think they need to water every day. Learn your soil and you will learn your watering practices and you'll save yourself a ton of work.
Different plants need different amounts of water, and I'm using this meter thing with the two probes
Uh-huh.
and seeing whether it needs water. And of course, I'm trying to figure out whether my watermelon needs water whenever it's just barely ticking the meter. That I'm pretty sure of. But if my sweet basil is just ticking that first mark or so, it doesn't. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a place I can find what range it would like to be having for that meter.
It's hard, because everything does, like you said, have different wants and needs. The best thing we try to do is pair those things together, so we have like plants with like watering. I don't worry too much about what plants supposedly don't go together. I just plant the things that I know have like needs, like watering requirements together.
Yeah, I don't know where to find what they need.
And almost all these plants that we grow as home gardeners need relatively the same amount of water. I plant this bed, everything else in there needs a lot more water than this. I just don't water really deeply around the root zone of this. I water everything else and I keep my watering away from it. And I know it gets probably more water than it might want, but it still thrives. So you just have to be selective. And that's where like watering at the soil level plays a huge part, because if you're overhead watering, you're wasting water, you're not getting water where it belongs. But with direct soil watering, I still water with a wand. So I'm selective. If one plant doesn't need it and one does, then the one plant gets water and I move on. But I use the plant and its foliage and the plant will tell you when it's not happy. And if it gets starting to get droopy, that's what it's designed to do. So, that's its way to talk to us. I'm not a big fan of getting too technical about it. I stick my hands in the dirt. If it's wet and the plant looks fine, I move on about my business and I don't water. If it's been a little longer than I think, and I'm like, man, I haven't watered and I really probably think I should, I might give it a little bit. But at the end of the day, I'm probably still watering far less than most people. I feed less than most people. I feed way less than I tell you to feed. Because what I'm working on is trying to create permanent sustenance in the soil. The less I can provide inputs, the more the soil will take care of itself. So it's you got to kind of find the fine line. And everybody, like I said, everybody has a different environment. We could be right next door to each other and our gardens can have two totally different needs. Some plants like humidity. We got humidity everywhere here. So if you find plants that are starting to look kind of like yellowy or deteriorating on the bottom side, they might not like a lot of humidity and they could use from some lower pruning. I find like rosemary, the bottom, when it overhangs my bed, all the bottom will begin to yellow. It's staying too damp up underneath there. So I'll prune it out, allowing airflow to flow up underneath it, and then it stays greener longer. But at the same time, I have so much rosemary that it's okay if I lose some. So some plants will take relative to humidity, others maybe not so much. But if you can increase your airflow by pruning, letting a little more spacing in there, you can mitigate some of those challenges there. We can plant herbs by seed. We can propagate. Not all these things are going to be easily done by seed. At the end of the day, most people plant herbs by transplants. Parsley, cilantro are very, very commonly done by seed because they're easy to deal with. They're more readily available. Some of these are very hard to germinate, but oftentimes a lot of the specialty varieties that we want, they're just not available in seed. We can't just run to the store and go grab African basil or Thai basil. There are all these different species that people find that works for them are not always out there. So, honestly, I don't bother with seed starting. Maybe cilantro when it comes to this, because it's just too easy to buy one. And I know I could start it if I needed it. But if we did need to start them, it's going to take all the same core principles of seed starting: light, airy mix, consistent moisture, and heat. You know, that's if you can have those 3 variables, then you'll be able to start seeds. And I also don't like starting seeds for herbs because it brings me back to the point of how many rosemaries do I really need? How many mint do I need? Like, unless I'm going to start them and give them away or sell them, sure. But when it comes to herbs, I really don't see many people planting seeds. There's not a single herb in 20 years that I've bought a package of, whether it be a quarter pound or a whole pound of one, the minimum quantity that I've sold out of. It's not a common practice. I'm not discouraging you from doing it, but it's a lot of time to put into something, you know, and a lot of us usually are at the end. Like you guys say, you're late to the game. I know all about that. I'm always late, so. A lot of these, though, we can propagate. Propagating is easy. We can take lemon balm, we can take mint, we could probably take this tarragon, we can find a healthy stalk, we can find this, we'll find a good leaf node lower down, and we can take an angular cut with a pair of scissors if it's just green and not woody. If it's a woody herb, you know, we can clip it with some small hand pruners, but we'll clip it right above the leaf node. That's going to allow what we left to branch out and become more compact. Then we can take this and we can root our cutting in water. I encourage you to put a couple drops of liquid seaweed into your water. It will make immensely healthier and more abundant roots. And that way when you go to transplanting your cutting, it's going to have a much better chance of thriving when you change it from that water propagation into soil. If you're propagating a woody herb, then you'll do it just like a woody cutting. You know, if you propagated a hibiscus or a rose, you'll take that woody cutting, remove the stems, and you can get some rooting hormone, dip it in there, and that's going to help this plant put off some roots so that it will actually establish in the soil, and then we can move it out into the garden whenever we're ready. We definitely want to make sure we have some established roots before we just throw a cutting into the ground. Could you throw a cutting into the ground with no roots and it work? Absolutely, but that plant's going to stress. I did this the other day with some salvia, some flowering salvia. I broke it off by accident while I was trying to transplant it, and I just stuck it in some dirt. The stems are alive, but every leaf has fallen off. It's just stressed, because it doesn't have any roots. So it's not being able to get enough nutrition while it's trying to establish those roots. So we can, I mentioned in the beginning that diversification is important. So planting herbs and tons of different species of plants, and not a haphazard nature. While this looks haphazard in a sense, it's very planned out. I plant all of my stuff based upon mature height and size. I use my edges for low-lying plants or things that can spill over the edge. I put tall things in the middle or on the back, and I layer them in so that I can get a lot of stuff in a small amount of space. So there are 7 usable raised beds, I think, in this video, along with 1 flower bed that's about 25 foot long, 2 foot wide. We had almost 60 species of plants in there. You know, I'm not telling you you need that many, but having a diverse environment, and a lot of those plants were herbs up on the table here. That has led me to be able to go 100% chemical free 2 years ago, because we've intermixed these herbs as our primary way to diversify and bring in pollinators and beneficial predators. But it's also allowed me to realize the importance of flowers, different shapes and colors, to even bolster that further. So this is probably a few weeks, maybe a month later. We stood outside for about 30 minutes and we found about 25 different species of insects. Not a single solitary one of them were something that I felt that I needed to kill or destroy. They all had a natural purpose. That's a swallowtail butterfly caterpillar destroying my dill plant. There's an assassin bug. We had a small aphid problem somewhere in the garden. We've got some common like mason type bees, or this is actually like some type of solitary bee out there. They're very efficient pollinators. We've got lacewings, another assassin bug. Let's see what else we found in here. Dragonfly. A lot of these herbs will bring dragonflies. Dragonflies devour mosquitoes like crazy.
Lots of those.
There's another swallowtail. You know, see my dill, it's almost stripped. But that same dill plant is still alive today. This is a fritillary caterpillar. There's the butterfly. And then here we've got like a red paper wasp. He's hanging out taking a break, but what he's doing, he's going down hunting for worms. And they ended up getting a couple of my swallowtail butterfly caterpillars, but at the end of the day, checks and balances in the garden are important. So we don't want an abundance of any one thing. So we have a lot of these common things that we might see as bad, but they're regulators in the garden. So
Do you ever get like venomous caterpillars or anything like harmful that like could hurt humans?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not anything, I've never seen anything that I'm like, you know, the scariest looking caterpillar in there, the one with all the black spikes,
Yeah.
that's the Gulf fritillary caterpillar. So, but it's scary. It's scary because it wants to detract from birds. And I'll tell you, the birds don't mess with them. The first year we had them, I probably had 20, 25 butterflies come off that plant. They were like, I mean, the amount of caterpillars, they almost ate the whole passion vine down, and it wasn't very big because I don't have room for it to get big like it wants to. You know, most of the worms,
They're not harmful.
most of them not. I mean, it'd be, I've never run into anything where I was afraid to touch it or get rid of it. I mean, my kid's the worm destroyer. You know, if my wife sees one and she doesn't want to touch it, she calls the kid in and he grabs it and plays with it.
What about stink bugs? So bad.
Stink bugs. I mean, stink bugs are deterred by planting early. You know, that's it. That's the only method. There's no fancy solution for that. Like, you're not going to disrupt a lot of those, but at the same time, like we truthfully, I haven't had stink bugs on my tomatoes in several years, but also I plant early. I'm done before the stink bugs come on.
Guess what I found for stink bugs?
Vacuum cleaner.
Oh, I wish I could. But, what I actually have found is that there's a Mexican sunflower. It's real prickly and everything as it grows, and it actually deters the stink bugs from coming around.
You can actually, if you grow sunflowers, like even like big
Sunflower. It's
Yeah.
it's a Mexican sunflower that doesn't look like a sunflower. It looks more like a daisy or something.
There's a lot of plants that stink bugs are attracted to, like big mammoth sunflowers. Once they get all the seeds set on them, you can go out there when the head starts to die, the stink bugs will devour. They'll cover it. It's like it's disturbing the amount. So there are other trap type plants that you can grow, and then you take them, dump them in soapy water, you disrupt the life cycle, and you prevent future generations from coming.
I've been out there with a spray bottle.
Yeah.
And put Dawn in it and spray it. Yeah. Then they buzz around you. Then what you think they're lost.
So your parsley family, like dental, parsley, fennel, cilantro, dill, they're all not only good at attracting things like the swallowtail butterflies. This is a video of this wasp in here. He's actually going to carry away one of these caterpillars. It's the wildest thing. The first time I ever saw this, I saw it online and I was like, there's no way this really happens. And but he carried it off, and that's like, you know, he's nature's checks and balance. You know, it's no different than us eating a cow. Like there's checks and balances. You know.
Like how a hawk can grab something that's much bigger than it. You know. Like, that's nuts.
So how do we care for them? Just like anything else, if you're caring for most of your other garden plants, take the same regimens. I'm always going to encourage you to use natural or organic practices, because at the end of the day, if we have healthy soil, then we're going to have healthy plants, and then we will be healthy people. It is a direct correlation, and you will be more successful if you have healthy soil and you follow natural practices. You're going to put a lot less inputs. You won't have any need for pesticides or chemical controls, organic or not. I don't have a lot of time to garden, and I'm proof that it can happen. We don't do anything anymore, and everything flourishes, and that's all about being very soil focused. So use slow release fertilizers, use things that are going to feed microbes, that are going to introduce bacteria, fungi into the soil, Because at the end of the day, while we can't see them, without them we cannot have a healthy plant. And in the beginning, we talked about how fresh produce tastes better, it's more beneficial. We can't have that if we don't have healthy soil. Pruning, harvesting, when we're dealing with these items, sometimes they're going to go really rapidly. We never want to cut off more than 1/3 of the plant at a time. That's a general rule of thumb for all plants. Never cut more than 1/3 of the growth off at a time. If you do, you're going to stress the plant. It's going to have longer recovery times. But, a lot of this times, even cutting, like I said, this, I'll probably cut 1/10 of this off. There's no way I could cut all that off. I'd be bored of processing rosemary by the time I got 1/3 of my plant taken care of.
What
So
do you
ju-
do with yours? I've got mine hanging to dry. Is
Um,
that the right way to do it?
Yep, that's actually what I'm about to talk about. So, pest and disease, in the grand scheme of things, most of these are pest and disease deterrents. They're pollinator attractors. There are very, very few, like extremely nuisance pests that you will deal with, to the point where, like, you said you got something eating on your basil. But it's probably some form of a worm or caterpillar eating on it because you're not seeing anything. But you're ideally not going to get aphids on these plants because they have repelling qualities. So if you take care of them, you feed them, you take care of your soil, these are not items that are going to require a lot of pest attention.
Is there a restroom?
Yep, through the front door there, it's in the center.
Oh,
So storage, there's a lot of different ways we can use this. I would say, it depends on what you want to do. How many people mostly use their herbs fresh?
I do.
How many of you dry them?
I'm starting to try that.
How many of you do any other kind of preservation other than drying or fresh use?
Freezing, ice cube like.
Okay, yep,
I got mine in some olive oil.
yeah.
My rosemary, I sent it some olive oil.
Oh, you did?
So number one way, how many of you have a spice cabinet full of dried spices? I never have a need to buy virtually any spice again. There's a few things that I can't grow that just don't grow here, but at the end of the day, all the stuff up here, I can supply myself indefinitely with most of these items. From one dill plant last year that I didn't harvest all of it, I have a quart jar of dried dill. I have zero use for that much dill. Like parsley, like one small thing of parsley lasts me forever. Things like dried thyme, we use them a lot, but at the end of the day, we can grow enough to meet our needs. Dehydrators are incredibly inexpensive if you want to speed up the process, and they do help you with longevity, because if you're doing a dehydrator, you're going to be able to extract the moisture quicker and more efficiently, but you can hang dry them. We do this as well at home. We dehydrate a lot, but I don't have enough space to hang dry all these. You could take any of these herbs if you want to dry them, bundle them up, tie them on the stem, hang them upside down. We have a little grid we hung on the wall, and I just take clothespins and I clothespin them to it, and they stay up there until they dry. You'll lose some color in them, but you're still going to have the aromatics, the flavor to it. And then depending on what it is, we'll take it once it's dry, we'll process it. We'll either chop it finely, or I'll run it through a food processor if I want to make it like a powder, and then we'll store those away. One of the things that I've found, that if you're going to preserve your herbs and you're going to dry them, get mason jars, get just the lids, and the best thing that I've done for longevity is there's a little vacuum press that you can put on top of your mason jar, and it will keep it from clumping, because the difference between that jar of herbs you bought at wherever that's been dry and you can shake it forever is anti-caking agents that we don't have at home, or we're probably not going to have. But putting it in that mason jar with just the seal or the lid, not the band. You don't have to put the band on it. You vacuum it down and it sucks all that oxygen out, so that moisture is what makes it cake up. So we're extracting a lot of that out there, and you'll get a lot longer shelf life on your personally dried herbs. And we do, every time we pop it off, we suck it back down. Takes a little time, but it's worth it because the flavor stays fresher, longer. You're not going to get oxygen degradation. So simple way to store your dried herbs. Even if they're in the little small ones, they'll work. You can dehydrate in an oven. I don't recommend it. It's way too easy to overdo, and your oven is theoretically too hot. You know, most ovens are only going to get down to maybe like 150, 170. And when you're drying out herbs in a dehydrator, you're looking for like 95 to 105. Very, very low temperature, but very consistent. Most of the time you can dry some of these herbs out in like 4 to 5 hours, but some could take up to 10. And this whole dehydrator, we're talking like a couple of days, you know, sometimes. But like, it still gets the job done. I don't complain. But, you know, low and slow helps preserve flavor. If you do it too hot, you're cooking out a lot of those oils and beneficial things that we're actually preserving.
Do you use parchment paper so it doesn't go through?
On the dehydrator, a lot of them have liners on them. If I were putting it in the oven, yeah, we put them on parchment paper, but we rarely do the oven anymore. You can freeze them. You know, so remember, some people mentioned olive oil. So a lot of your savory herbs, your basils, rosemary, oregano, you can put them in olive oil, and you can freeze them in like ice cubes where you can pop them out and use them when you're cooking. So you've got an oil base with a really, really high flavor profile. It's a great way to preserve. You can do the same thing with your basil. You can pre-make pesto, put them in ice cubes, use them as a cooking base, or reconstitute them back. So there are ways that you can prolong that use without having to have all this dry good everywhere. Another way, one of my personal favorites, whether you want to make your own butter or not, like we'll make our own butter sometimes. A lot of your savory herbs will make really, really good finishing butters for potato dishes, cooking on steaks, like rosemary butter. Excellent, simple way. If you don't want to make your own butter, get some unsalted butter, soften it, mix it in there with your dried herbs that you've dehydrated or let dry. Or you can actually do it with fresh, like rosemary, you can do it fresh. But if you do fresh, your shelf life is going to be shorter. Like things that you use that have a liquid content to it are going to have a much shorter shelf life. So don't make big batches unless you're going to share with others, because it's not going to last more than a couple weeks if you're lucky. Another great way, simple way, how many of you are big salad eaters or grow a lot of salad greens? So you can take a lot of these herbs, we can muddle them or we can bruise them. Then we can pour them into a jar with hot olive oil. So we heat up our oil, we can put it over bruised or muddled leaves, which muddled helps release the oils. You want to make sure you don't over muddle something. If you muddle a thing like mint, or whether you're doing tea or you're extracting, if you over muddle, you're going to start muddling out the chlorophyll, and that gives you bitterness. So usually if you do, you can do like a spoon, or if you got like a mortar and pestle, 3 to 4, decent presses on it, and that's enough. Then you can take preheated oil, pour it over your herbs into a jar, seal it up, and then let it sit for 1 to 2 weeks. Let that extract the flavor. Then you'll basically put it through a strainer. Then you can seal it up in a bottle, and you'll have something that will probably last several months. It's not gonna last forever because you got moisture content in there. Depends on the quality of the dried herbs or whether you did them fresh. But you can definitely use that for cooking. Flavored olive oils are pretty awesome, especially if you put a little bit of spice in some of them, a little pepper in some of them. Definitely some good flavor profiles. But when I talk about salads, obviously we might use flavored oils on salads, but you can also make flavored vinegar. You can take dill, do the same exact thing. Heat up some vinegar, get your prepped herbs, rinsed, dried, put them in a container. You can steep them in that warm vinegar. You'll extract out a lot of those flavors, strain them out the same way, and then you can have a base to make different vinaigrettes. You can have different salad dressings that you might like. You can experiment with other things that you have and that you like to get different flavors out of utilizing some of these herbs. That's pretty much me reaching to the end of my talk today without blabbering on for an excessive amount of time. And open it up for questions. What can I answer today?
What's your favorite thing to do with preserving your cilantro?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I never preserve cilantro. I just eat it. I just eat it. Like,
Okay.
I like it fresh, but so I truthfully have zero experience in preserving cilantro. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with that one because it's such a unique flavor. I would imagine you could preserve it like any other herb in its family, but I don't know what it'll do to the flavor.
Because of it quits when it gets hot.
Yep,
So then you don't have any fresh. So,
that's one I'll have to look up. I hadn't thought about that one. So
yeah.
I grow that one less than everything else, so it's one that I didn't think about whenever I was doing my. Every year before I do these classes, I do more homework to see if there's something new that I've learned or something else out there. So that's a good one for me to do later today.
What's like the most? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Is there an herb of some kind that can keep snails and slugs away?
Oh.
No, not necessarily, but keep in mind, snails and slugs most of the time don't want your plants. If your snail and slug is really eating on your plant, then they're not getting what they need from the soil. So your soil might not have a diverse environment in it. Like when it rains at my house, if you want to see slugs and snails, like I got them, like by the hundreds. I can go one raised bed, 4 foot in diameter. I could probably pick out 50 of them, but I never have to put out snail bait. I never have damage on my plants, very rarely. The only thing that they ever damage, they eat my strawberries. But put little bags over the strawberries this year, solve that problem.
I eat my Chinese cabbage.
You know, but they like same thing with like a roly-poly. Roly-poly will do damage to a plant, but only if it can't find. It's like the last resort. You know, pill bugs they're not harmful. They're great soil disruptors, aerators. But a lot of these items they're not after your plants. They don't feed primarily on a lot of the plants we have in the garden. But if it's too wet, stays excessively damp, you're going to drive them up into your plants. And if it stays wet too long, because that's the only time we ever see snails and slugs in my garden, after a heavy rain, I can go outside within like 10 minutes after it stops, and they will be on every plant on the side of every raised bed in existence. But I don't deal with a lot of damage. And it's only whenever I'm getting excessive moisture. So keep that in mind. You might be driving them onto the plants if you're over irrigating. Your question.
This is just a fun one. What is like the most herbaceous meal you've ever made, like with the most variety of herbs in it?
I'm not the best person to answer this
Oh,
question.
man.
Because if you've never been to any of my classes, I don't eat a lot of vegetables. I can grow.
Bro,
I can
what
grow.
are you doing?
I can grow the hell out of some vegetables, but I still have a kid's taste. Like,
Chicken nuggets and French fries.
no. But I
Garden.
everything has to be cooked in. Like, but I don't. I don't have. I don't. My senses are terrible. I can't smell anything. I can't hear anything, and I don't like my taste buds like greens and things like that. They don't taste like anything to me, like absolutely nothing. My taste buds just don't like. It's not terrible, but I mean, if it doesn't taste good, I just, it's just,
Isn't it okay to fertilize herbs?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. You can fertilize if you do like an organic fertilizer, like a slow release. You do it like about once every 90 days. Just during like I usually fertilize starting in February, right before things begin to start growing, so that my fertilizer has time to break down, because this is something I always like to remind people. What do we have inside here? We got dry goods. Can your plants eat this? Oh. So we need to get it in the soil ahead of time, and we need to be constantly adding fertilizer over extended periods of time, not all the time, but a little bit at a time, to ensure that it has time for the microbes to break it down and make it available to the plant. Because dry material provides no value to your plants. Now, if your plant is struggling and needs like immediate access to nutrition, that's where a liquid organic fertilizer comes into play, because it is instant. You know, it's soluble. It's going to suck it in and it's going to use it and it's done. So those have their place, but they, keep something like this or any other slow release organic at least 3 times a year.
Spray them and then you could put that for later.
Yep, I do this. I do this, and then we'll use liquids as needed. You could use them a lot more than I do, but I mean, if my plants are growing and they look healthy, I don't really put a whole lot on them. Yeah, I could probably get more, but most of the time I get what I want and then some. So.
Ask a question. This year I've noticed on my mint and a few of my other herbs, I'm getting this bubble look under the leaves, like bubbles, like little baby air bubbles.
Okay.
And I can smash it, but it's all over. It's like little spider webs almost.
Or is it like traily inside? Does it look like a little maze underneath?
No.
Okay. It could be some type, it could be still similar. It could be some type like, have you ever seen like a citrus leaf miner? So a citrus leaf miner, if you go to my store right now and you look at every citrus tree, some of the leaves look terrible. And that's because there are certain insects that will lay eggs underneath the surface of certain types of leaves. And that's where they finish their life cycle, and they'll just be under there and they'll cause deformations to leaves. So it could be something similar. I've never seen that, but.
There's nothing like that, but I can take and just do like that and all the bubbles go away.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never seen that before.
It's the weirdest. I should have took a picture of it.
So.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of it and bring it next time. I did take a picture of one bug that I got in my Dianthus really bad, and I had a whole bunch of them one day, and then they were all gone. It was a black, almost like the red bug.
The assassin bug?
Assassin bug, but it was black with a red stripe down it.
It could be, I think there's a harlequin beetle that looks very similar, but I'm not 100% sure.
They were there and then they were gone.
And that's why I tell people, if you see bugs, unless they're like physically doing some damage and you can see it happening, or like you see negative things happening, leave it alone. Like, you will be so much greater off by just leaving it alone.
That's what I did. I just waited to see what they were going to do.
What other questions?
What would you plant? I know you said basil with tomatoes. I've always heard that. But peppers and cucumbers, are there herbs that are good with those?
There probably are. I'm going to be honest with you. I just plant whatever. Wherever. There are things like, they say, like, even in the herb world, they say don't plant fennel and dill next to each other. They'll disrupt each other's growth. They're almost identical looking plants. But I mean, there's a whole world out there that believes companion planting doesn't exist, and there is. I just experiment, because I don't plant my stuff in the same place every time, because I don't want to initiate pest and disease pressure by planting the same crop in the same spot year after year after year. So, and then I have some of these herbs that like I said, are staples. So I just plant them, and 9 times out of 10, I don't have any issues with plants growing around things that they supposedly don't grow around. But I mean, that's just my personal experience from it. So.
What can you do for cutworms?
Cutworm? You're talking about like cutworms that cut off at the base of the plant? Typically put something solid next to it, like a nail. No problem. Appreciate you guys. Just something solid, because they have to wrap themselves all the way around, but also cutworms, cutworms like bare soil to complete their life cycle. So keeping a mulched bed can disrupt cutworms. I haven't had a cutworm in a long time, but I keep my stuff heavily mulched. I would like to assume that's the reason why, because that's what I've always learned.
It was all in my walkways, but
Yeah.
I didn't have any last year. Now this year I've got 2 or 3, and they seem to stay in the same spot.
Same spot, yeah.
I plant something, cuts it.
Yep.
I dig in there and look, I don't find anything. So I plant another one there, cuts it. So then I plant another one, and my husband said he heard that I should put a straw around it. He had some of those big straws you drink out of. So I cut it to fit this little stem and put that in there, and then he cut it. So
Yeah, that's, I mean, they can't cut through something hard like that, and that's kind of, my grandpa used to stick like, whatever size, penny nail next to it right up against the stem, so because they want to wrap their body all the way around, and so if they can't do that, they're not going to be able to make it all the way through, and they'll stop. They'll go on to something else or try to find something else. So
I've never even heard of a cutworm. Those are little nefarious little
a lot of people like cutworm. people call cutworm is like the most misunderstood worm in the garden because people are like, cutworms, like, what, are they cutting off your plants at the base? No, then it's not a cutworm. You know, that's all cutworms do. They just chop plants down. You know, any other worm that's eating your leaves, that's a totally different ball game, you know. And that's kind of, for me, like those types of worms are, it depends on the state of the plant. You know, if I already got most of my produce off of it, most of these worms are turning into something beneficial, you know. And granted, I can't save them all.
Worms don't.
No, cutworm,
I'm sure they don't.
cutworm can't, cutworm's got to go, you know. Yeah. No problem.
Oh, yeah, appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys coming.